My fasting blood sugar went from 108 down to 91 in 30 days. My grip strength improved, and on the cognitive test I give myself every month, I scored higher than I had in 2 years. I didn't change my diet. I didn't add a new workout. I didn't sleep more. I changed one thing, one compound every day. Subscribe right now because my next video is going to show you exactly how to use this compound correctly. Most people either take too little, take it at the wrong time, or combine it with habits that completely blunt the effect. I'm going to walk through the full protocol step by step, and you do not want to miss that. Now, before I explain what the compound is, I need to make sure you understand why it worked. Because if you don't understand the mechanism, you'll either dismiss this or misuse it. You've probably heard people say that getting older just means your body starts failing you, that stiff legs, sluggish blood sugar, and a foggy mind are just the price of time. That's the conventional narrative. You're supposed to accept it, manage it, slow it down at best. Here's what I want you to hear today. That belief is not always accurate. At least that's not how I started seeing it after looking deeper into the research and my own experience. The decline most people experience isn't inevitable decay. It's the result of a specific biological process that starts breaking down in your 30s, accelerates in your 40s, and quietly dismantles your energy, your metabolism, and your cognitive sharpness before most people even realize it's happening. And that process has a name, it has a mechanism, and more importantly, it has a fix. That process is mitochondrial dysfunction combined with insulin resistance at the cellular level. Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful, so let me make it simple. Think of every cell in your body as a tiny city. Inside that city, the mitochondria are the power plants. They take fuel and convert it into usable energy. Insulin is the delivery truck. Its job is to pull glucose out of your blood and bring it into those power plants. When the delivery system breaks down, when insulin stops being recognized at the cell door, the fuel piles up in the bloodstream instead of getting burned. That's high blood sugar. Meanwhile, the power plants are running inefficiently. That's why your legs feel heavy. That's why your brain feels like it's working through fog. The city isn't dying. The infrastructure is just congested. Now here's where this gets interesting. There's a master switch inside your cells called AMPK. Think of it as the city's emergency management system. When AMPK gets activated, it clears the traffic, opens the cell doors, tells the mitochondria to work harder, and essentially restores order. Most people have never heard of AMPK. Most doctors don't talk about it. But this switch is arguably one of the most powerful targets in metabolic health research right now. And the compound I took for 30 days is one of the most potent natural activators of AMPK ever studied. It's called berberine, a plant-derived alkaloid that's been used in traditional Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine for over 2,000 years, but has only in the last 2 decades started receiving the rigorous clinical attention it deserves. Multiple peer-reviewed trials have now compared its effects on blood sugar to pharmaceutical interventions, and in several head-to-head comparisons, the results were not embarrassing for berberine. At 500 milligrams daily, split across meals, I used it the way the research supports, not as a hack, as a protocol. But here's what I wasn't fully prepared for. The blood sugar response. I expected that. The memory improvement, that genuinely surprised me, and the mechanism behind it is specific and fascinating. And the leg strength? That one has an explanation rooted in how berberine interacts with muscle fiber recruitment that most people talking about this compound never even mention. We're going to go through all of it. Starting with what berberine does to your metabolism at a level most YouTube channels won't take you to. Let's start with blood sugar. Because if you've been walking around with fasting glucose numbers in that pre-diabetic gray zone, anywhere between 100 and 125, and your doctor told you to watch your diet and come back in 6 months, I want you to understand what's actually available to you beyond that advice. What berberine does to blood sugar regulation is genuinely remarkable. The outcome first. In multiple randomized controlled trials, berberine has produced reductions in fasting blood glucose, post-meal glucose spikes, and HbA1c, the 3-month average blood sugar marker, that rival outcomes seen with common pharmaceutical interventions. Not in rats, in humans. The mechanism comes back to that AMPK switch I described earlier. When AMPK is activated, it increases the number of glucose transporters, called GLUT4, that physically move to the surface of your muscle cells and fat cells. More transporters at the door means more glucose gets pulled out of the bloodstream and shuttled into tissue where it can be used. Your blood sugar drops not because you starved yourself, but because your cells became more responsive. That's a fundamentally different conversation than eat less sugar. Now the legs. This is where people get surprised because berberine is almost never talked about in the context of physical performance, but it should be. Here's the outcome. Over my 30 days, my leg pressing numbers went up, my recovery between sets shortened, and the chronic low-grade heaviness I'd been feeling in my quads, that feeling like your legs just never fully refresh, essentially disappeared. The mechanism is tied to two things. First, improved glucose delivery to muscle tissue means your muscles have better access to fuel during exercise and better glycogen replenishment afterward. Second, research shows berberine has a measurable effect on reducing inflammatory markers, specifically certain interleukins that interfere with muscle fiber signaling. When inflammation at the cellular level drops, muscles communicate better and fatigue less rapidly. A clinical trial published in the last few years specifically looking at berberine's effects on exercise capacity found meaningful improvements in muscular endurance in middle-aged adults. That study didn't make headlines. It should have. I want to be honest with you about something personal here. Before I started this protocol, I had quietly accepted that some of the physical sharpness I had at 35 was just gone at 44. Stairs felt like a tax. The week I noticed I was taking them 2 at a time again, genuinely without thinking about it, I sat down and pulled every paper I had on berberine's musculoskeletal effects, because I needed to understand what had changed. That moment is what pushed me to record this video. Now I know what you're thinking. Dr. Okoye, couldn't this just be a placebo effect or a coincidence in your training? And I understand that skepticism completely. Here's why that's not the full picture. The blood work doesn't lie. A 12-point drop in fasting glucose doesn't come from belief. Neither does a measurable shift in inflammatory markers on a panel. The subjective experience, the legs, the energy, lines up precisely with what the mechanistic research predicts would happen when those markers move. That's not a coincidence. That's physiology working the way it's supposed to. Memory and cognitive clarity. This benefit stunned me the most. The outcome? Sharper word retrieval, faster processing during complex problem solving, and meaningfully better focus sustained across long blocks of work. The mechanism here is less discussed but well supported. The brain is an extraordinarily glucose-hungry organ. It consumes roughly 20% of your body's energy, despite being only 2% of your body weight. When insulin resistance is present, the brain itself can become starved for fuel, even when blood glucose is technically elevated. Berberine's ability to restore insulin sensitivity extends to cerebrovascular function. Research now shows it also modulates acetylcholine pathways, the neurotransmitter system most associated with memory encoding and recall, and reduces neuroinflammation, which is increasingly understood as a primary driver of cognitive decline, not just a symptom of it. And then there's the fourth benefit, the one that changes how you think about everything we've discussed so far. Because berberine doesn't just improve how your body uses energy, there's emerging evidence that it fundamentally changes how much energy your body is willing to burn at rest. And the mechanism behind that one is unlike anything else in this space. Before I tell you what I personally use, I need to walk you through something that frustrates me deeply as a clinician. because it's the reason most people who try berberine don't get results and conclude it doesn't work. The problem isn't berberine, the problem is bioavailability. Berberine as a raw compound has notoriously poor absorption. It gets degraded in the gut before it ever reaches your bloodstream in meaningful concentrations. The majority of products on the market are selling you straight berberine HCl powder in a capsule. Inexpensive to manufacture, easy to label, almost entirely inadequate to deliver the blood levels the research is actually based on. Worse, many formulations are underdosed and padded with fillers that actively compete with absorption. You could be taking a product every single day, feeling nothing, spending money, and walking away convinced berberine is overhyped. That conclusion isn't wrong, it's just pointed at the wrong variable. The compound works. The delivery system most companies are using doesn't. Different forms exist, and some are more studied for absorption. I personally looked into dihydroberberine, but I'm not here to recommend anything specific. Okay, now we have almost reached the end. I took some questions from my Telegram channel. I told them about the compound long before I made this video. I also share free health tips for seniors over 60. The link is in description. Now, let's take some of your common questions. When is the best time to take berberine? Morning, night, with food, or without? Take it with meals, specifically your 2 or 3 largest meals of the day. Berberine works in part by blunting post-meal glucose spikes, so timing it to coincide with food intake is where it performs best. Taking it on an empty stomach increases the likelihood of GI discomfort and reduces its functional window. Can I take berberine if I'm already on metformin or a blood sugar medication? This is a conversation you must have with your prescribing physician before starting. Berberine and metformin operate through overlapping pathways, and combining them without monitoring can push glucose lower than intended. That's not a reason to avoid berberine, it's a reason to involve your doctor so adjustments can be made safely. Will berberine work if I don't change my diet at all? Some people may notice effects even without major lifestyle changes, but results are usually more consistent when other habits are in place too. But berberine is not a license to eat carelessly. Think of it as amplifying the signal of good inputs, not replacing them. The people in clinical trials who saw the most significant metabolic improvements were eating broadly reasonable diets. It works with your biology, not around it. Are there any side effects I should know about going in? The most commonly reported ones are gastrointestinal, loose stools, mild cramping, or nausea, particularly in the first week. These typically resolve as your gut adjusts. Starting at a lower dose for the first 5 to 7 days and titrating up tends to minimize this significantly. If symptoms persist beyond 2 weeks, stop and consult a provider. How long before I actually notice something? Blood sugar improvements tend to show up in the first 2 to 3 weeks on lab work. Subjective energy and physical performance changes, the leg strength, the cognitive clarity, I notice most clearly around week 3. Give it a full 30 days before drawing conclusions. Is this safe for women specifically, including those with hormonal conditions? Research on berberine in women with PCOS has actually been quite promising. Several trials show improvements in insulin sensitivity and hormonal markers. That said, berberine is not recommended during pregnancy or breastfeeding. For any active hormonal condition, confirm with your physician first. That's berberine. 500 milligrams a day, 30 days, results I didn't fully anticipate. And now you understand exactly why they happened. Next week, I'm going into a compound that most people have never considered for cognitive performance, but that research is quietly building a very serious case for. I think it's going to change how you think about brain health entirely. Make sure you're subscribed because that one is not a video you want to find 6 months later.